America, planet Earth. My name is Joe Nice. You know who I am. You know what I'm about. Today's date is December 3, 2020, December the 3rd, 2020. December 3, 2020, coming to you as always live and direct with the appropriately titled live and direct chats. These have been daily conversations that have been taking place since on or about towards the end of March, since I've been back in the United States as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Once again, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This time last year, I was living in Vancouver, Canada, having a nice life. I was 3 shows into a 10-show European tour when the pandemic began, and oops, upside my head and everybody else's. So back to America I went because the borders between the United States and Canada are closed, and they will continue to be closed until the earliest date, which is January 21st of 2021. That's Charlie Menton. We see you, brother. All the best, my man. Going to go about a long 60 minutes. 60 minutes, that's what we're going to do today. And I've got a lot on my mind, a lot to talk about. Of course, I did not sleep well last night because last night was just a weird night of sleep. I woke up early this morning, went on my walk, tried to work out, and just wasn't happy. Just wasn't happy and just wasn't having it. So a lot on my mind from yesterday with regards to a lot of the stuff that's taking place in the news. I posted up a couple of videos on my Instagram page about a lot of stuff that's happening right now. A lot of stuff that's happening right now. A whole lot that's going on. At minimum, I want to talk about. Gosh, I don't even know where to begin. There's so much to talk about. My gosh, yesterday, we spoke about the workers' strike in India. Dr. Anthony, good morning, sir. Albuquerque, we see you. Talked about the workers' strike in India and how in India this past weekend, 250 million people, I'm going to say that again, 250 million people, 250 million people went on strike in India. Went on strike and they just said, you know what, the hell with this, we're not dealing with this, we're shutting this whole thing down. And when you talk about 250 million people, they just said, you know what, we're not working anymore. We're going to organize across different labor groups, different labor unions, different types of work, and we're going to shut this country down. And we're going to wait until the prime minister of the country, a gentleman named Narendra Modi, I think his name is, responds to our demands. And I actually have some of the demands written here. Some of the demands are direct payment of 7,500 rupees per month. 7,500 rupees works out to about $100 American per month. A pension for all plan, a monthly supply of 10 kilograms, which is 22 pounds of food grades to families in need, and privatization of the public sector, and expanded welfare for everybody. Now, again, and I said this on my Instagram the other day, could you imagine if 25% of the population of the United States went on strike? The population of the United States is approximately 333 million. So you're talking about between 80 and 81 million people. Could you imagine if 82 million people in the United States said, you know what, we're not going anywhere today. We're not working. We're not working. Could you imagine if a bunch of lawyers said, you know what, Lawyers of America, we're part of the American Bar Association and we're going on strike. We're not handling anybody's cases. We're not doing any of that. Yeah, all of us grocery store workers of America, did you see us in the produce aisles and you see us slicing your deli meat and you see us putting gallons of milk in the dairy section and putting cheese on the shelves? We're not working today. Yeah, you see all of us that drive these big brown trucks that wear these UPS uniforms? We're not doing anything either. Could you imagine the impact that 82 million Americans, which is again 25% of the United States population, could you imagine if 82 million Americans just threw up their hands and said, you know what, we're not working today. And guess what? We're not working tomorrow. And we're not coming back the next day after that. And we're not doing anything until our demands are met. And when we talk about demands, your man's got a list of demands. We talked about them right here. Let's go over them once again. Let me get this camera angle right. Let me get it tight. Let me turn it this way. Let me slide it over this way. All right. Let me move back a little bit. There it is. All right. These are some of the demands. COVID-19 relief, including universal basic income, Medicare for all, hazard pay for frontline workers, rent, eviction, and parking moratoriums, expanded SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the food stamps program for the unemployed and underemployed, student loan cancellation, nationwide marijuana legalization, a demilitarized Green New Deal, and freeing prisoners, including deactivating ICE. ICE is Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, ending bail for jail, releasing all nonviolent drug offenders. And let's not forget that the reason you have so many nonviolent drug offenders behind bars right now is because of Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill and the extension of the Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill in Kamala Harris, where she locked up a whole lot of Black and brown people for minor drug offenses and kept them longer than their prescribed sentencing. And housing for all. Everybody deserves a house. Housing is a human right, and people who do not not providing housing to your citizenry is a violation of human rights as prescribed by the United United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. We talked about that in the latest episode of the Joe and Kat Chat series. So again, this type of fervor, this type of anger, this type of frustration, this type of energy is what we need in the United States. Could you imagine if our brothers and sisters in the north of Canada, and Canada's got about 37, 38 million people. So you divide that by 4, you're looking at about 9.5 million people. Could you imagine if 9.5 Canadians working at your local Sobeys or working at your local Save-On grocery store, or working at your local Canadian Tire, which is kind of the super store. It's kind of the Canadian answer to Walmart or Target. Could you imagine if 9.5 million Canadians said, you know what, hey, we're not working. We're not working. We're not doing this. And we're not doing this until Justin Trudeau listens to us. And he actually gives us the universal basic income. We're not doing anything until he demilitarizes the military, defunds the military. We're not doing anything until he stops drilling for oil in Indigenous Canadian, in First Nations communities. We're not doing anything until he does that. Could you imagine the impact that would have? And again, we need this type. And again, we need this type of this level of fervor. We need this level of anger. We need something to wake America up, so the people in power, all 538 members of Congress in Washington, D.C., are forced to give Americans Medicare for all and a universal basic income and come up with a reasonable jobs program. Because right now, what's happening right now is not adequate. It's not suitable. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And when you talk about what's unacceptable, 2 months ago, just before the election, Nancy Pelosi had the White House, Stephen Mnuchin and Larry Kudlow, had worked with Nancy Pelosi and House leadership and worked with Senate leadership to say, hey, look, here's a $1.8 trillion stimulus package. It's on the table. Here you go. Take it or leave it. Nancy Pelosi was like, this bill doesn't go too far enough. There's not enough money in it. There's not enough money in this. We want $2.2 trillion. White House was like, well, look, we're running out of time. You better do something. You better shit or get off the pot. You better take this money and run, or that's it. What happens? Election happens. They go just before the election, a whole bunch of senators went away to campaign. Then they came back and they went on vacation again about a week and a half ago. Now there's a bipartisan group of senators that are saying, hey, look, here's a $900 billion deal, a $900 billion stimulus package. And the $900 billion stimulus package, I'm going to read some of this to you all. It's $300 a week in unemployment insurance, $300 billion in Paycheck Protection Program money, $250 billion in state and local funding, a temporary liability shield, and $50 billion for vaccines, and no stimulus checks. Once again, no stimulus checks. And that's the $900 billion deal. That's a bipartisan agreement. Now, Mitch McConnell, leader of the Senate, says, hey, no state money, no local money, full liability shield forever, 1 month of unemployment checks, no money for transit agencies, and no stimulus checks. And when I tell people, hey, you know what? I want everybody out of everybody out of Congress. I want everybody gone. I want everybody gone. People laugh at me. People laughed at me when I said, hey, you know what? And again, when I said, hey, look, you know what? Voting for Joe Biden isn't necessarily the right thing to do. It's not the right way. oh, no, no, we got to get Joe Biden out. We got to move him to the left. We got to push him to the left. Where's Joe Biden now? What's he fighting for? And I don't want to hear from people, oh, well, you know what? He isn't in the White House yet. He doesn't have any power. He has plenty of power. He's the president-elect of the United States. He could be talking to people in Congress to push for some programs that would actually benefit the American people. That's what he should be doing. That's what he should be doing. And let me go back, and when we talk about protests, let's not forget. And again, I've spoken about France a whole lot. I've spoken about France basically every week for the better part of a little more than a year, with me wearing yellow vests on a Saturday night show and taking a picture of it and posting it on my Instagram and letting everybody know, hey, look, these yellow vests, the Gilets Jaunes movement is a real deal, and we need this sort of movement in the United States. And I was saying that before the pandemic. I was like, look, we need people in the streets fighting for actual stuff for Americans. And I was saying that before COVID-19. Now COVID-19, it's like, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, okay, we'll figure out what to do. We'll talk about it. We'll negotiate. We'll have some committees. We'll have some task force that don't do shit. And then when it's actually time to do something, we'll have talked about something, but then we won't actually get anything done. There's an old adage, and God bless my Uncle Ansel for telling me this years ago. He said, you know what, Joe? You can always call me Jojo. He said, Jojo, whenever it's all said and done, there's always more said than done. And I'm going to say that again. Whenever it's all said and done, there is always more said than done. And he's right. He's right. There's a whole lot of people talking and not doing a whole lot of anything. A whole lot of people. The French were protesting this past weekend over the new security law. It was Article 22 or 23 of the security law. 150,000 people in the streets of Paris. 150,000 people in the streets of Paris. I was at the Commitment March in Washington, D.C. earlier this year that Al Sharpton had organized. Al Sharpton's organization had organized. And then that was promoted quite heavily. And there were people from as far away as Oakland, California, Portland, Oregon, that came out to the Commitment March. And even with the Commitment March, there were 60,000 people in Washington, D.C. Within the span of, 36 to 54 to 72 hours. 150,000 people in France marched in the streets. 150,000 people. And guess what that 150,000 people did? It had the French security minister and Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, shaking in their boots and saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, let's go ahead and rewrite this law. And the French people are going to protest again this week, and I don't blame them, because that law right now should not be rewritten. It should be tossed in the trash. Tossed in the trash. Don't rewrite that law. Throw it out. Get rid of it. Let me move their handles aside. I gotta remember, everything is in reverse on this camera thing. It's like cutting your hair. When you go like this, you're actually going down. But yeah, I gotta remember reverse. Think in reverse. But look, this is what needs to happen. And again, let's go back to India again. Again, quarter billion people in India. 250 million people. The largest worker strike in human history, and not a peep about that on mainstream American news or any kind of mainstream news organization. 150,000 people protesting in the streets in France, in Paris. Not a peep about that in the United States. Probably nothing about it in Canada either. And you want to know why? Because the last thing the mainstream media apparatus in the United States is having an angered people get ideas. And again, when we talk about India, let's not forget, on this date, 36 years ago, with the Bhopal gas incident, there was a company, I think, out of Texas named Union Carbide that had a massive gas spill, killed thousands of people, and poisoned hundreds of thousands of other people, of Indians. And that was 36 years ago today, and they're still dealing with that environmental disaster. When you talk about massive global ecological and environmental disasters, that Bhopal oil spill, or gas spill, I should say, it's one of the worst ever. I mean, let me put it to you like this. It's not quite Chernobyl, and it's not exactly the Fukushima situation that took place, I want to say in the early 90s. And it's certainly not 3 Mile Island, which took place just outside, I think in New Jersey or just outside of Philadelphia, 1978 or 79, if I'm not mistaken. But that Union Carbide gas leak, that's as nasty as it gets. And that was 36 years ago. And people are still dealing with the effects of that. 36 years later, you have 250 million Indians walking the streets saying, you know what? We're done with this. We're done with this neoliberal bullshit. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. And just if a COVID-19 pandemic that by the end of this month is going to render another 30 million families homeless isn't going to get people in the streets angry and frustrated to galvanize with each other and get in the streets and protest until something happens, I don't know what will. I don't know what will. But right now, what we have right now is a situation that's a divide and conquer situation. And we're falling into the trap. We're falling into divide and conquer. And what we need to do is unite and fight. I'm going to say that again. We can't divide. We can't be in a divide and conquer situation. We must unite and fight. Once again, unite and fight. Unite and fight. Unite and fight. Unite and fight. And I'm disappointed in the government right now. I've been disappointed in the government. I've been disappointed in government leadership. I'm disappointed in Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was the guy that was saying, hey, you know what? When Joe Biden, let's get Joe Biden in and we're going to move him to the left. Let's get Joe Biden in. We'll move him left. We'll move him left. I haven't heard anything from Joe Biden since the election. Not Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders. I haven't heard anything from Bernie Sanders since the election. And the election was a month ago tomorrow, 30 days. I've heard nothing from him. Sure, there was a Thanksgiving break, but you would think there would be more than just a couple of tweets saying, hey, look, we need a stimulus package. And the Senate's, the House and the Senate need to work together to serve the American people. I would have thought we would have heard more than that or seen more than that. I talked about this on my Instagram, and a brother on the Instagram was like, well, look, Joe, Bernie can only do so much. What do you want Bernie to actually do? And this is what I said. I said, look, I want Bernie to tell the first one is not my idea. Jimmy Dore came up with this idea. And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. He said, look, tell the progressives to hold their vote for the House Speaker until she puts a vote for Medicare for all in the House. Get her on camera, get it written down. And this is a brilliant political strategy by Jimmy Dore. And he's a really smart guy. And I like when he came up with this idea, because it's the type of political hardball that the progressives in the House need to be playing. And we need to actually see if they are actually progressive or not. Because if they don't go ahead and pressure Nancy Pelosi to do something for the American people, then there's no reason to vote for any of the progressives in the House at all. So the Ilhan Omars, the Pramila Jayapal, and Ayanna Presley, and AOC, and Jamal Bowman. What's the purpose of voting for them if they're just going to go ahead and vote for anything and everything that Nancy Pelosi puts on the table? What's the point? Why bother voting for them? And he's right. He's like, look, force them to hold their votes. And if they don't vote, if they don't do what Nancy Pelosi needs them to do, then guess what? You're going to have a Senate Republican as the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Do you think America really wants that? I mean, America doesn't really want Pelosi anyway. But this is the kind of political hardball I think we need to start to play. Now, the rest of these ideas, stuff that I've been thinking about for a long while. As you read a lot of different articles, you figure out, hey, you know what? These are things that Joe Biden could do without any sort of legislative activity. He doesn't have to go to the House or the Senate at all. He can. Bernie Sanders could go ahead and pressure Joe Biden to completely cancel student loan debt instead of the $10,000 forgiveness that Joe Biden is offering. And again, the president of the United States has executive order power to completely cancel student loan debt. What he can do is draft up some sort of executive order with his White House lawyers, and they can say, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and ask the Federal Reserve for whatever the entire amount of student loan debt is, whatever that number is, which is probably 1.8, $1.9 trillion. So we'll say, hey, look, we're going to give out, here's $2 trillion. $2 trillion. All your student loan debt, canceled, gone, bye, see you later, done. And Joe Biden could do that with a stroke of a pen, but I don't want a pen. I want a Sharpie. I want fine point Sharpie just like this right here. Sharpie that in. Don't pencil it in, because when you pencil shit in, you're going to be erased. Permanent marker, Sharpie, fine point. Do that. All right. Bernie Sanders could pressure Joe Biden to reschedule marijuana from a Schedule 1 drug, which is what marijuana is now, to a Schedule 3 drug. And if he does that, if he just changes the schedule, which I'm sure he has executive power to do, that would, for all intents and purposes, decriminalize marijuana. Because Schedule 1 drugs are drugs that are basically illegal. You reschedule to a Schedule 3 drug. Schedule 3 drugs is stuff like Ambien. I think Tylenol is a Schedule 3 drug, if I'm not mistaken. If he reschedules the drug marijuana from 1 to 3, that's an immediate pathway to decriminalizing marijuana nationwide, which certainly would be useful. All right. Something else that Joe Biden could do, and this is going, and I know Kat and I are going to do an entire episode devoted to this, but I'll explain this in a bit more detail. What Joe Biden could do is, what Bernie Sanders could do is pressure Joe Biden to use Section 1881A, A as an alpha, of the Social Security Act to give COVID-infected Americans direct access to Medicare for all. And you're like, well, Joe, what is Section 1881A of the Social Security Act? Well, Section 1881, 1881A alpha of the Social Security Act basically gives people who have been who have been rendered sick or ill as a result of an environmental exposure direct access to Medicare. No questions asked. You can show that you have been made sick by an environmental issue, direct Medicare for all access. Now, there's a small town in Montana called Libby, Montana, and Libby, Montana was able to get Medicare for all. Not only all of the residents, which were about 5,300 residents, but people are in the surrounding communities as a result of an asbestos contamination. They were able to get Medicare for all. No questions asked. Now, if they can get Medicare for all for an environmental exposure, and again, asbestos is clearly an environmental exposure, I would certainly think that the coronavirus is an environmental exposure. And if you've been infected with COVID-19, I certainly think that Bernie Sanders should be pressuring Joe Biden to say, hey, look, use the Section 1881A of the Social Security Act as an under the environmental exposure legislation to give everybody who's been infected with COVID-19 direct access to Medicare for all. Then let's take it even a step further. You know what else is an environmental exposure? How about lead paint? How about lead? How about lead in the water? How about giving people who've been affected by lead paint and lead in the water direct access to Medicare for all? Because I certainly think lead is an environmental exposure. So again, if the people of Libby, Montana can get Medicare for all because of asbestos, I would certainly think that the people in Flint, Michigan with dirty water with lead in the water should be getting Medicare for all. I would certainly think a bunch of people in Baltimore, Maryland, the city I grew up in, where there's a lead problem, a massive lead problem with lead in the water and lead paint, should get access to Medicare for all access. Chicago, same thing. Again, environmental exposure. And the fifth thing that Bernie Sanders should be doing to pressure Joe Biden is uniting labor unions, different labor unions across the board, to execute a workers' strike across the board. So again, if you're a butcher, if you're a barber, if you're a carpenter, if you're a pipe fitter or a steam fitter or a plumber, if you're a bricklayer, if whatever you're doing, if you're a UPS driver, if you work at a Target as a package handler, if you work for a contracting company as a drywall specialist, if you work as an HVAC technician, whatever your job is, he should be organizing labor unions. And if you build transmissions for Dodge, you're an upholstery manufacturer if you're an upholstery servicer for a furniture company, whatever you're doing, you should be organizing labor unions across this country and getting every one of them to go on strike collectively, simultaneously, and force Joe Biden and the 538 members of Congress to do what we need them to do now more than ever. Because, again, the longer we wait, the worse this gets. I'm going to say that again. The longer we wait, the worse this gets. About 25 minutes in, I got about another, maybe another 10 or 15 minutes or so. If you have any questions, let me know. Let's get to some of the messages here we got going on. Charlie Mentom saying, yes, Joe. Right on, brother. We see you. Anthony saying, good morning, Joe. What it is. Christy Lynn with a couple of hands emoji. All right. We like that. Cool. Anthony saying we need someone on the left to have a backbone and make this happen. Galvanize into the streets. I agree. We need somebody in the streets. We need people in the streets. There's a couple of days ago when today's Thursday. So Tuesday, 2 days ago when Kat and I did episode number 26 of the Joe and Kat Chat series, one of the terminologies that we mentioned in our latest episode called the vocabulary of politics, I mentioned a word called solidarity. And I discussed solidarity and defined solidarity. And then I gave a little bit of a history as to the word solidarity. And I mentioned a Polish labor activist and electrician named Lech Walesa. And his movement was a labor movement that essentially overthrew the communist government in Poland. And I want to say the mid to late 80s. Overthrew the government. And he became the first democratically elected president of Poland. And that was a labor union movement. It was a labor union movement. He galvanized a whole bunch of different labor unions across the country, across Poland, and said, hey, you know what? This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And we see this communist government. We don't want this. We're going to overthrow this government with a labor-centered focus, a labor-centered movement. And that's what he did. And he was able to do that successfully. He did that successfully. And I said in the video with me and Kat, and I said, America needs a Lech Walesa-like character. We need somebody that's going to galvanize labor unions across the board and get into the streets and fight. We have to unite and fight. Again, that's going to be the theme of the day today. We're going to let that's the phrase that pays. Unite and fight. Okay, and granted, we do have some people that are doing that right now. Christian Smalls is a former Amazon worker from Long Island, New York, that essentially blew the whistle on Amazon and said, hey, look, Amazon's not taking care of their people. And he was a supervisor there, making decent money. He was like, look, Amazon's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not providing PPE. They're not doing any sort of physical distancing to make sure that the COVID-19 does not spread throughout this facility in Long Island. And Amazon executives not only tried to smear him in a leaked memo, but they fired him. And then he said, you know what? The hell with this. Shut down Amazon. And he has a growing movement right now of people that are in the streets with him, that are looking to get Amazon, for the people that are still at Amazon, to make sure that they get the pay that they deserve and to make sure that they get the workers' protection that they deserve. He's in the streets. He had a protest, I want to say Thanksgiving weekend, in front of Jeff Bezos' mansion in Beverly Hills. A $185 million mansion, I might add. Had a protest in the streets. He had a protest in another one of Jeff Bezos' house in Washington, D.C., in Georgetown. If you've ever been to Georgetown, Georgetown is really nice. It's a really nice place, really expensive houses. If you're lucky enough, you can buy an actual big house instead of one of these row houses that's 925 square feet that cost you $4 million. It has a crawl space for a basement. There you go. There's your Georgetown house. But he had an entire protest in front of Jeff Bezos' house in Georgetown, in Washington, D.C. And people are starting to pay attention. So again, we must unite and fight. And speaking of phrases, speaking of slogans, again, I've made my feelings quite apparent about the previous president of the United States, not Donald Trump, but Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama has been the most harmful president of my lifetime. And that's saying something. because we've had some really shitty presidents in my lifetime, and I'm 44 years old. I'm not old enough to remember everything that Jimmy Carter did, but I remember a lot of what Reagan did, and the first Bush, and then Bill Clinton, who was horrific, and then Bush again, and then 8 years of Obama. Obama's, and again, for all you Trump supporters out there, don't think, oh, well, hey, just because Joe doesn't like Obama, Joe just might like Trump. No, Trump's shit too. He's terrible. He's horrible. But Obama, the other day in an interview, he said, you'll lose people with, quote, snappy slogans like defund the police. Those were Obama's words. He said that in an interview. He said, you'll lose people with snappy slogans like defund the police. You know, you also lose people when you say, hope, change, yes, we can. You'll also lose people when you say, oh, we'll let it play out with regards to the Dakota Access Pipeline. You'll lose people when you say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we actually did torture some people. We did that. We tortured Chelsea Manning. We did torture some people. And it was in the interest of national security. You're going to lose some people when you say, hey, change we can believe in. You're going to lose some people when Trayvon Martin gets murdered by George Zimmerman, and you get in front of a camera and you say, you know what, Trayvon could have been my son. But then after that, do nothing about gun reform in the United States, and do nothing to launch a Department of Justice investigation as to why white cops consistently kill black people in the streets. Barack Obama could have done something, and he had 2 black attorney generals that did nothing. Another snappy phrase that Obama said at his last White House dinner was Obama out. And I really wish that when he said that he was out, that he would just stay away from the public eye. I really wish that we didn't have to hear from him or see him or talk about him, but we're talking about him because that motherfucker just doesn't go away. He never goes away. He never goes away. He never goes away. How arrogant of an asshole do you have to be to write 3 memoirs? 3. And this latest book, his latest memoir, it's part 1 of 2. And this one that he just put out in the shops is 700 pages. 700 pages. And then he's probably going to release another one, probably around this time next year, maybe 4th of July. So you have something to read. Maybe if you're by the pool, if we're allowed to go to pools next summer. Imagine how arrogant you have to be to write 3 books about your life. Imagine. And again, this is the same guy that when he became president in 2008, we were bombing Afghanistan and Pakistan. By the end of his tenure, we were bombing Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, Chad, Syria, and oh boy, there was one other country. There was one other country, I can't remember the name of it, but it was 7 countries. Libya, that was the other country, Libya. Those are the 7 countries. So just remember the other 6 and add Libya to it. All right? He turned Libya into a failed state with open slave markets. Consistently funded Israel and supported Palestine and supported Palestine murders. He didn't close Guantanamo Bay when he said he would. He tortured Chelsea Manning. He allowed militarized police to beat up Occupy protesters. He made the Bush tax cuts permanent. He helped to deregulate Wall Street and made all of the banks bigger. Then when they got too big to fail, he bailed them out. And he bailed them out on the backs of homeowners and kicked 5.1 families, not people, families, out of their houses. He gave everybody a Republican health care plan when he said, yeah, you know what? Everyone's going to get health care. He campaigned on that. He said, you know what? Everyone's going to get health care. But he said, this public option, maybe we'll look at it. Let's do this whole three-legged stool model of health care. That's essentially Mitt Romney's mass care. And then let's have the Republicans water it down even more, even though I had a filibuster-proof Senate, and he could have done whatever the hell he wanted. He opened the Arctic up to Shell Oil for Arctic drilling twice. Not once, but twice. Twice. He deployed troops at Standing Rock. He did nothing for the teachers and unions in Wisconsin. Absolutely nothing. When the bank bailouts took place, he didn't prosecute a single banker. Then he ends up giving speeches to Wall Street, the same Wall Street bankers that he didn't prosecute, and made a ton of money doing it. That's why he lives on a 48-acre estate in Martha's Vineyard now. He cut funding for AIDS research in Africa. Trump didn't do that. Obama did that. And 2 days ago was World AIDS Day. Let's not forget the pandemic that really took over this world before COVID-19 was the AIDS, and it was called the AIDS epidemic, but let's really call it for what it is. It was an AIDS pandemic. That's what it was. It was an AIDS pandemic. It was an AIDS pandemic. All right? Barack Obama funded ISIS. Go ahead and Google a search term, timber sycamore. Timber sycamore. Go ahead and read everything about timber sycamore. Barack Obama funded ISIS. He didn't pardon Julian Assange. For years, he tried to extradite him to the United States and was unsuccessful in doing so. He didn't pardon Edward Snowden. And he tortured Chelsea Manning, a whistleblower who's entitled to whistleblower protections. Obama did all of this. But then that arrogant asshole is going to go ahead and say, oh, well, you're going to lose people with snappy slogans like defund the police. This is the same guy, Barack Obama, who said if he was a politician in the 1980s, a lot of his policies would be moderately Republican. Said that in a 60 Minutes interview. You dig deep enough, you could probably find it. Think about that. A Democratic president that ran on hope, change, yes we can, and change you can believe in. When he shoots a basketball and he makes a shot from the 3-point line about a month ago, he said, "That's what I do. That's what I do." You know what else he did? He also deported more people than all the other previous presidents combined. He failed to do anything about giving the people of Flint clean water. He repealed habeas corpus. And then all the Yemen drone strikes. Now there's a famine in Yemen. Ran out of bombs in Syria. Obama did that. Ran out of bombs in Syria. Dropped 26,000 bombs in Syria. Ran out of bombs in Syria. But again, Obama has the temerity and the arrogance and the ignorance and I don't care who says what about what I'm going to say next, but the white privilege. To say you're going to lose some people with snappy phrases like defund the police. After Christian Minaris saying, "Good points, Joe, you know what's going on." I'm trying. think I've said all I want to say for today. Seamus Walker saying, I can't believe the major news outlets are keeping the movements in India and France quiet. Trying to, quote, trying to keep smart people from getting ideas is right, man. I agree. I agree. I agree. And I not only agree with you, it's because it's what I said and you're repeating what I said and agreeing with what I said and I'm agreeing with you agreeing with me. That doesn't have anything to do with it. But maybe it does. But the mainstream news media in the United States and Canada and probably in England and maybe in Ireland and a lot of other westernized countries are like, hey, you know what? Yeah, whoa. We can't have these people in the streets who are being oppressed by our government knowing how to actually overthrow us. Oh, no. Uh-uh. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Can't have that. Can't have that. Because what these governments want us to do is fail the test. It's fail the test. And the crazy part about the test is that the answers are right in front of us. We have all of the answers. And it's not just in a collection of books that you can read through about protests and movements throughout history that have been successful. You don't have to read about history to understand that history is being made now. And we're seeing historical protests in, let's hold on, let's take a look at this. 2 weeks ago on the Joe and Cat Chat series, I talked about the rubber duck revolution. And I said, hey, look, this rubber duck, it's actually my daughter's adopted sister's rubber duck. She's too old for it. But I said, yeah, let me borrow this of mine. She's like, yeah, okay, Mr. Joe. She calls me Mr. Joe, even though, which is fine because I'm not her biological dad, but you know what it is. But that rubber duck is a symbol of what's happening right now with the protesters in Thailand and how they're fighting for democracy and fighting for their rights against the monarchy. And the protesters in Bangkok, Thailand, and in other cities in Thailand have resorted to wearing rubber inflatable duck vests as a symbol of their oppression and a symbol of their struggle. And not only a symbol of their oppression and struggle, but a symbol of their solidarity. So again, I went ahead and decided to borrow that duck for a while because I'm not going to walk around here with a big inflatable duck around myself. But if I have a little rubber duck and I can talk about the rubber duck the rubber duck revolution that's taking place right now in Bangkok, Thailand. Okay. And Thailand's a big country with a lot of people. They're getting people on the streets every weekend. Every weekend. You know, for the better part of a year and a half, I was when I was playing shows, whenever I play a show on a Saturday night, I would wear a yellow vest and I'd take a picture of myself wearing a yellow vest and I'd put a little paragraph or a little caption underneath the picture saying, hey, look, I'm wearing a yellow vest to bring awareness to the yellow vest movement in Paris and to bring awareness that workers' rights are being infringed upon in France and people need to stand up. And I was saying this a year and a half ago. I was like, yo, look, we need a yellow vest movement here in the United States. Canada needs a yellow vest movement. And I was saying that before the words COVID-19 were on everyone's lips. Whenever I go on my morning walks, part of this is a safety thing because I actually want people to see me when I'm walking. But part of it is, hey, I'm wearing a yellow vest when I walk the streets. When I go for my 10,000 steps walk every morning. Sure, it's a safety thing, but it's also that spirit of wearing that yellow vest. Saying, look, we need to be in the streets protesting. We need to raise awareness. We need to stand up. And again, those in power want to divide and conquer. And it is incumbent upon all of us to unite and fight. Unite and fight. want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me a bit of your time in your day. And I know time is precious. Time is the most precious of commodities. It's the one commodity that we spend and we cannot get back in any form or fashion. And I want to make sure that whenever I do these videos, I'm respectful and respecting of your time, because I know all of you who watch this, your time is valuable. And I appreciate your eyes and ears and the opportunity to express myself in this new space. You never know. There may be a time where I will decide to express myself musically again. That fire's still inside of me. I just don't have my turntables with me right now, and quite honestly, there's more important stuff right now than flinging around dub plates. Although that is fun, and I do miss doing it, but there's other stuff. There's other stuff that needs to be done. So again, thank you for your time today. I appreciate each and every one of you. Looking forward to seeing my little baby girl tonight. She turned 10 years old this past Sunday. And I know many of us have lost a whole lot since this pandemic has taken place. A whole lot. Some more than others, but the one thing this pandemic has done for me is allowed me to be a lot closer physically to my daughter. And for everything I've lost, I'll do it all over again just to be closer to my daughter. I'll make that deal any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Might be back tomorrow, we'll see. I will go ahead and post this video on my Facebook fan page. I'll make sure this video gets posted on my Instagram account. Once again, my Instagram account is JoeNiceDJ. Just like the Facebook fan page. I hate using the term fan page, but fine. JoeNiceDJ. All right. Remember, everybody, unite and fight. Peace.